has been a long time since I have sat down and just gone through some thriller book recommendations, and so that is what we're going to do today. I have made many different videos over the years recommending thriller books in many different ways, and I have them all in a playlist so you can watch all of my thriller book recommendations, which I will have linked below if you want to check that out. For today's video, I just realized it's been a long time since I've sat down and given thriller book recommendations, and so I just took a look at all of the thrillers I've read since I last did a sit-down video recommending thriller books, and I found some that I've enjoyed that I haven't really sat down and put in a recommendation video yet. If you're kind of newer to my channel and you maybe don't know my reading taste the most yet, I really enjoy kind of like campier thrillers. I like really ridiculous, over the top stuff. I like for them to be fun, action-packed, twisty, and surprising. They don't always have to be realistic. I like it when a book can really fool me and make me think I'm reading one thing, but then it's something else. And generally I like stories that dive into like the psychology of the human mind. All of these books I'm recommending today fit into that bucket of what I like to read, so if none of that sounds like anything you like to read, these will probably be anti-book recommendations for you. Books you know you should probably stay away from. But if that sounds like the type of stuff you like to read, then hopefully you can find a new book to add to your TBR. I'm going to be going in order that I read the books, so it'll start with books I read the longest ago to the books I read most recently. And the first book that I have to talk about is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. One of my favorite thrillers ever is No Exit by this author, so I was very excited to read something else from Taylor Adams, and this one turned out to be a really good success for me as well. This is probably the most ridiculous book that I have to talk about today, so if you really don't like ridiculous, over-the-top things, this one will not be for you. But if you like that, if you like a thriller that's a little sillier and campier and ridiculous and doesn't take itself too seriously, this is going to be a great one for you. In this story, you're following a woman named Emma who is kind of living in isolation. She's off in this house and not many other people are around. It's like this beach area and it's not in the season, and she is just dealing with some trauma. So she is just isolating herself in this house with her dog, and she is reading books to escape from her life. One day she ends up reading this book that was really bad, and she leaves a 1-star review of the book, and then the author ends up commenting back on the review asking her to take it down. They get in a little argument, and then it seems like this author may be coming after her. That's all I'm going to say about this one. I don't want to reveal too much because it's just really silly and fun, and it is such a page turner. If you also liked No Exit, I think you would like this one as well because it has a similar really fast pace that keeps you turning the pages, and this has been one of my favorite thrillers of 2023. Another new one from this year that I really enjoyed is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This is Riley Sager's newest book. I have read all of the books that he has come out with under the Riley Sager pseudonym at least, and this one is one of the ones that I enjoyed. I have kind of like a love-hate relationship with his books. Some of them work really well for me, some of them do not, but this one I did really enjoy. I also have enjoyed Home Before Dark and Lock Every Door, if that gives you a reference of the ones that I tend to really enjoy. And this one was just fun, fast-paced, kind of tropey, but not in a horribly annoying way, like just in a fun way. The end gets a little bit ridiculous with a bunch of twists, and the ending wasn't my absolute favorite, but I just had fun reading the book in general. It was a good time, it was an easy read, and I overall just really liked the vibes of it. In this one, you're following a woman named Kit who is an in-home healthcare aide worker, and she is moving into this house to take care of this older woman named Lenora. Lenora is very infamous in their town because of an incident from many years ago. Back when Lenora was a teen, her entire family was murdered and she was the only survivor, and kind of built up this reputation around her that she was the one who killed her family, but she never went to jail for it or anything. She just kind of lived in infamy in this town. No one really bothers her. She just kind of stays in her house. She's super old now. She's not mobile, and Kit is moving in to help take care of her. And once Kit does move in, Lenora starts to communicate with Kit through a typewriter, and she tells Kit that she is going to tell her her whole life story. So you're revealing what actually happened in the past and wondering if Kit is in a dangerous situation in the present day living with Lenora, who may or may not be a murderer. This felt like the type of story that Riley Sager is just really good at writing, when it's tropey and gothic and twisty, ridiculous in its own ways, and just a lot of fun. Next up is The Chain by Adrian McKinty. Last year I read The Island by Adrian McKinty. That was my first read from him and I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite thrillers of the year. So I decided to dive into his backlist and I picked up The Chain this year, and again, it was a 5-star. I had such a good time with it. In this story, you're following a woman named Rachel, and one day her daughter gets kidnapped, and then Rachel gets a call, and the person on the other line is telling them that she has to pay a large ransom to get her child back, but she also has to kidnap someone else's child. And it is this chain that is never ending, that you have to kidnap someone else's child and get them to kidnap someone else's child before you can get your child back. And it is never ending. And if you don't do it, the chain is going to come after you and you and your family are going to die. So it places the characters in this absolutely impossible situation with all of these moral and ethical dilemmas, and it is just so high stakes, high action, fast paced, thrilling, exhilarating, all of the things. Like, this was a really good action thriller that just pulls you into the story, makes you care about these characters, and has you on the edge of your seat the entire time wondering how they're going to get out. Between this and The Island, I feel like Adrian McKinty just does a really good job placing characters in such a difficult situation and placing the reader on this journey with them, where you're just like, oh my gosh, how are they going to get out of it? What's going to happen next? I don't know where this book could possibly go. And while they are anxiety-inducing reads, they are also just a lot of fun. So I really am excited to see more from Adrian McKinty in the future. Now that I've read and loved 2 of his books, I cannot wait to see what he does next. Next up is Look Closer by David Ellis. This one is kind of like a cat and mouse type of thriller, which is also one of my favorite subgenres of thrillers. I love watching multiple characters trying to get a step ahead of the other one, and you're following both and you're kind of maybe rooting for both at some times. It just really keeps me really engaged in the story, and this one definitely did that. In this one, you're following a married couple named Simon and Vicky, and it's really hard to talk about this one because it's kind of best to go in not knowing a ton about it. But let's just say Simon and Vicky have an interesting relationship and someone ends up dead, and then it ends up becoming a cat and mouse game of lies and deception and grudges, and it is just a very, very fun read. My only gripe with this one was it is kind of long, so if you don't love longer thrillers, this one is a little bit chunkier, over 400 pages, and it didn't necessarily feel like it needed to be that long, but still the book was really fast-paced and really fun. There's a lot of little reveals along the way that keep you engaged in the story. Some of them you might see coming, but by the end, there is a really big twist that I did not see coming at all, and that is one of my favorite experiences to have with a thriller book, is when it can totally surprise me, and this book definitely did that. Next up is I Will Find You by Harlan Coben. This was my first Harlan Coben book that I have read. I have seen several of the TV shows that have been made that are adaptations of his books, so I was kind of familiar with his style and what to expect generally going into the book, but this was my first time encountering his actual writing style, and I had a really good time with it. This is more of an action-based kind of thriller. It kind of feels like a movie, like a Liam Neeson movie in a way. And in this story, you're following a guy named David whose son was murdered many years ago. His son was murdered in the night when only David was home, and so David ends up getting accused of the murder and he ends up going to prison, but he has always claimed that he didn't do it, but he doesn't know who did murder his son. And then one day his sister-in-law shows up to visit for prison, and she has this photograph where there is a boy in the picture who seems to be the son, aged up now that many years have passed. This kickstarts David's journey, where he decides to break out of prison and go on this crazy chase to try to figure out if that's really his son who is alive after all of these years, who he's with, and why he was murdered, and why David was put into prison for it. And it is just such an adventure. This is another one where it's kind of this like crazy over-the-top situation. Like, can you imagine breaking out of prison and then being on the run? That's like very high stakes the whole time, and also kind of has like a cat and mouse element because the authorities are trying to catch him, he's running away from the authorities. So again, it has all these elements I like that keep you on the edge of your seat, where you're like, I can't see where the story's going to go from here. It keeps you really engaged, it keeps you guessing what's going to happen next, and it has a really compelling mystery at the center of it as well, because you're like, is that really his son? Is his son not really dead? And if he's not, then why? Why did all of that happen? Like I said, this was my first Harlan Coben, but I will definitely be reading more. Next up is a book that really surprised me this year, and that is The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding. I read several books from Robin Harding in the past, and while I always have a good time with her stories, they've never been favorites of mine or wildly memorable books. So I kind of was expecting this to be pretty similar. I thought it'd be a good time, but I didn't think it would make such a big impact on me. But I absolutely loved this. I thought the story was not only super well written, but also super engaging, surprising, and just a really good time. As you can tell by now, I like cat and mouse thrillers, and this is another kind of cat and mouse thriller. You're following two women in this book, Hazel and Lee. And Lee is down on her luck after the COVID pandemic. Her life has kind of gone to shambles and she is currently homeless. And Hazel is this really wealthy woman who seems to have this beautiful, wonderful life. Their paths end up colliding when Lee ends up saving Hazel from drowning. Hazel is the drowning woman. And after that, they kind of become connected and start to bond. And as Lee is introduced into Hazel's life, things take some sinister turns. I thought the characters were so well developed in this one, especially Lee. I had so much sympathy for her and just following her in her journey. I was really impressed with Robin Harding's writing in this and how quickly she got me really engaged in the story and the characters in it. I also just loved seeing how the story unfolded, particularly the way the story is told. I thought was done in a really interesting way. There were a few twists and turns and reveals along the way, and overall I just thought it was a really solid thriller. Next up is Falling by TJ Newman. Kind of similar to The Chain, this is a story where a character is given an impossible situation that they have to navigate, and you as the reader just get so engaged in seeing which direction it's going to go. In this one, you're following a pilot who is flying a plane, and he ends up getting a communication while he's flying the plane that his family is being held captive and they are going to be murdered unless he crashes the plane, which would kill everyone on the plane. So he's faced with this impossible decision of, do I prioritize my own safety and all the people on this plane doing my job, or my family? What in the world do you do? This is probably the book on this list that made me the most physically anxious while reading. I would feel my chest getting tight. Like, this was very visceral for me because it is just so high stakes, so action-packed, it goes so fast, and it just has you feeling so on edge while you're reading. I thought the author did a great job making everything feel really cinematic and real and really getting you super engaged in the story. I also think this is the author's debut, which is also super impressive. And then she came out with another book called Drowning, which is also a sort of plane thriller, but I think that the plane ends up in the water and then they're like trying to save themselves from drowning. I have that one on my shelves. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited to check that one out as well after really enjoying this one. And then finally, the book that I've read most recently is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. So if you've been keeping up with my channel, you probably saw me talking about this one very recently, but I had a really good time with this thriller, and I think it's the first time I've given a Lisa Jewell book a 5-star. There's really nothing that special about this book. I just thought it was done really well. It's just kind of like a small town mystery where many years ago this girl disappeared and her mom's still trying to find her, and then this new couple moves into this house, and then the woman starts finding all these little things that are kind of like connecting to that mystery, and you're getting the past timeline and the present timeline and just trying to piece together what happened to this teenage girl. This is another one where I thought the characters were just built super well. I love it when my characters can feel so real, because sometimes I'm just reading a thriller to have a fun time and I'm not like looking for a lot of depth to my characters. I just want to be surprised. But when you can give me surprises and a compelling mystery, plus you have characters who feel really complex and real and fully developed to me, that is when I'm giving out a 5-star. And this was definitely one of those. Like I said, it's my first 5-star, I think, that I've given to a Lisa Jewell book, even though I've read a handful of them. But this has kind of reinvigorated my taste for Lisa Jewell. I'm like, yeah, I want to read more books from her because I just thought this was done really well. So that's it for all of my latest thriller book recommendations. Let me know down in the comments below if you plan on picking any of these up, or if you've read them before and you also want to endorse them, you can do that down below as well. And if you have any recommendations for me based on all of these books I enjoyed, please let me know, because I'm always looking for more 5-star thriller books. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!